Okay, so this is 6 unknown or little known about childhood trauma triggers that make you suddenly feel very emotional. Maybe you feel very anxious out of nowhere. Maybe you have this disproportionate response to a situation and you may not even realize why. So let's get stuck into them. These are the 6 triggers. Trigger 1: thoughtless or oblivious people. When someone cuts you off in traffic or speaks loudly, it stings more than it should. It reminds you of moments when you felt invisible as a child. Your brain is linking their thoughtlessness to past neglect. But they're not your parents, and this isn't the past. We can't control their behavior. We can control how much we let it affect us. Recognize that not everything is personal. Most people aren't even aware of the impact they have. You're no longer a powerless child. You can choose how you respond now. So this is probably one of the main triggers for most people, is how other people act, especially with driving, or how people conduct themselves in public areas. For me, the other day when I was in a coffee shop, there was a man on the phone speaking really loudly, and I suddenly felt this sense of anxiety in my stomach. And the thought patterns and the thought dialogue was something like, why does he have to speak so loud? Doesn't he know I can hear everything? I almost felt threatened by him. So that probably was a trigger, and I was being triggered because I had that overreaction to it. That situation. I mean, he's just speaking loud. It's nothing really that personal. He doesn't realize he's doing it, but that's a trigger, and that's basically rubbing against something from when I was a child. Maybe being yelled at, having some kind of emotional response to something I did, which made me feel threatened, which made me feel outcasted or neglected in some ways. So my inner child is being poked in that moment. And you'll find that with most of these triggers, that's the case. Trigger 2: struggling to say no and expecting mind reading. It's exhausting to keep saying yes when you want to say no, but guilt holds you hostage. This comes from a childhood need for approval. Back then, no felt unsafe. As adults, we resent others if not noticing our struggles. But no one can read your mind. It's not their job. Start small. Say no to something minor. Feel the freedom in choosing yourself. You're not selfish for setting boundaries. You're showing others how to respect you. This is very common in the workplace where something's annoying you, something isn't right, maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had with a colleague, and you just don't do it. It builds up, and then they do one little small thing and you erupt, or you pout, or you close off, or you just storm out. And that's you being triggered because you've put too much emphasis on not being able to say no. So it builds up into this big monster, which then comes out and causes lots of trouble. So it's always better just to enforce a boundary early rather than have it explode. Trigger 3: fear of someone being mad at you or misunderstanding you. Disagreements or anger from others can feel overwhelming. It brings back memories of when anger meant danger. Growing up, anger might have been an unpredictable or even scary. Now, even harmless anger feels threatening. But as adults, not all anger is harmful. Sometimes it's just someone expressing their emotions. Your inner child needs reassurance during these moments. You can remind them, we're safe now. It's okay if someone misunderstands you. Your worth isn't tied to their approval. This was also a big trigger for me because if someone was arguing, like I said, if someone's arguing in a coffee shop, I will feel triggered because I feel like the anger's directed at me, like I've done something wrong. Or if someone's shouting at their child, then I would immediately feel that same pain, that same triggered emotional response would still be projected onto me because I feel like it's me that's being shouted at, like I'd done something wrong as well. So a big problem with this is that you then dissociate from anger. You then demonize your own anger, and then you never let anger out and let it have you don't have a healthy view on anger, so then you never want to be seen as angry. But the problem is you have this what is known as a long fuse, and then suddenly you just explode over nothing because you don't let it out gently. It's okay to occasionally vent and have anger about something, but you can't let it be your entire being. You cannot let it completely take over because you've demonized it in your mind somehow. Trigger 4: other people's moods. Do you find yourself absorbed in someone else's bad mood? It's like their emotions hijack your day. This comes from growing up in a volatile environment. You learn to stay hypervigilant for survival, but now other people's emotions don't control your life. You can acknowledge them without taking them on. Validate your inner child's hyper-awareness. It once kept you safe. but now you are in charge. Practice grounding yourself when emotions feel overwhelming. Take a deep breath and remind yourself, this isn't mine to carry. I found myself being very sensitive to other people's moods. And again, like work colleagues or family members, if they were in a mood, I'd equate that to be something that I'd done wrong. And this comes from the idea of shame, that on some level you believe that you are not good enough, you're not worthy. So it's quite narcissistic to just then believe that everybody, because if they're in a bad mood, it's something to do with you. So you feel like you're treading on eggshells. You almost want to apologize to them for something that you may have done. And obviously this does come from childhood, where your parents suddenly switched it up and were not giving you they weren't giving you the love or the unconditional love that you need in that moment. So you blame yourself. You think that something is wrong with you. And this then gets carried into adulthood. So other people's moods, then you become very sensitive to other people's moods. Trigger 5, ambiguity. Uncertainty can feel unbearable, like waiting for bad news. It brings up old fears of chaos or neglect. In childhood, unclear situations often felt unsafe. Now, ambiguity triggers those same insecurities. You're no longer in survival mode. Uncertainty is uncomfortable but not dangerous. When faced with ambiguity, focus on what you can control. Small actions can bring clarity to the present. Trust yourself to handle whatever comes next. You've already survived so much. So in my video, I did another video called the 7 subtle reasons you self-sabotage. And in that video, I talk about chaos and the fear of the other shoe dropping, where essentially, if you have ambiguity, it makes you feel like something bad will probably happen because it's uncertain. And most people with this level of shame, where they believe that on some level they are at fault for what's going to happen. Ambiguity feels like pain. It feels like torture. So you self-sabotage because you're triggered and you don't want to feel that feeling anymore. So you just want to get it over with. You want to get that feeling out of the way. So ambiguity can be especially in relationships, if someone doesn't reply to you. Ambiguity can be a big trigger, especially within relationships. If you don't get that text message back, or suddenly being ghosted can be extremely triggering, because it just reminds you of not getting your needs met as a child. It just reminds you of that on some level maybe you're not good enough for the love. And this is extremely triggering because it's really pressing against that part of you which says, am I good enough? Do I deserve love? Do I deserve love? Am I worthy? And if you're equating your sense of value to whether you get a reply or a text message, and you don't get it, then that's going to be very painful and that's going to trigger you. Trigger 6, feedback, positive, negative, or neutral. Feedback can feel like a personal attack even when it's not. This stems from a childhood filled with criticism or comparison. Positive feedback might feel uncomfortable, as if you don't deserve it. Negative feedback can trigger shame or self-doubt. But feedback is just information. It's not a measure of your worth. Separate it from the past and look at it objectively. When someone praises you, pause and let it sink in. You're worthy of recognition without guilt. If feedback feels harsh, remind yourself, this is about the work, not me. You are more than any critique. And feedback is extremely direct when it can be negative, because we equate the action with our worth. So for example, you messed up at work, so therefore what you did is bad because you are bad. You are therefore essentially bad. And that triggers that feeling of shame. Shame, again, is the belief that one is not good enough, one is not worthy, one is unlovable. So you see that feedback can be really triggering, and it can cause us to tiptoe around getting feedback. We never really want feedback, and then when we do get feedback, it can be really difficult for us to receive. Also with positive feedback, if you do have shame, then you never really feel like you deserve it, so it can cause this very uncomfortable feeling of guilt, or that you don't deserve it because of all the bad things that you've done. Okay, so having awareness around these triggers and understanding them a little bit better is really key. The key is awareness. What you're dealing with, if you do have complex trauma or shame, the belief that you are not good enough on some fundamental level from trauma, this is so misunderstood, is that these triggers will be causing this underlying uncomfortable anxiety in your day, throughout your day. And triggers are all around us, and we are basically ran by our subconscious minds. So we may not even be realize that we are being triggered. And the day-to-day triggers, the day-to-day situations that come up, it's better to have preparation for them and spot them rather than just think, well, why am I feeling like this? I shouldn't feel like this. And then you shame yourself even more. Whereas if you realize that these triggers are causing you a lot of problems in your life, then you can spot them, prepare for them, and be ready for them when they arise. And then we can create that gap between our response, between the actual trigger itself and our response to the trigger. And that's key. When you have that gap, that's when you start to build awareness around this. You can go into situations and be like, this is probably going to trigger me, but because I'm aware, because I'm conscious of this, I'm going to be able to do a lot better in this situation, rather than go unconsciously angry and start saying and doing things that you really don't want, causing much worse problems because you're triggered. Anyway, guys, I hope that helps. Please comment under the video now, which one of these triggers is the one that probably triggers you the most, and how do you prepare for it? Like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps out the algorithm or whatever, so other guys can see these videos. Anyway, that's great. If you want to learn more about self-sabotage, then click on this video here. Anyway, peace.